Hi everyone, Sajid Amit here. So welcome to my what's going to be a somewhat of a quick and dirty shootout of two DACs in around the $3,000 price point. So I have with me the Ferrum Audio Wandla HP edition, which essentially is the same as their flagship DAC, which is the Wandla. So this is the same circuit as a Wandla, same DAC as a Wandla, but this has the headphone output, which is not an afterthought like is the case with a lot of DACs and preamps. This is actually a well-performing, a well-thought-out headphone amp with the 4.4 output, of course, 4.4 mm output, and it is for you guys who don't just want to drive a random headphone if you have a speaker system, but if you have a speaker system and you want to drive a serious headphone. But this also has some serious power, which we'll get into. And of course, if you are not a two-channel person, but if you are a headphone person, and that's fine as well. And this is also for you in that case, because, I mean, you're not going to get an XLR output with this, which is okay. I mean, if you want to drive anything else that can benefit from a 4.4, or if you have an adapter that converts your XLR to 4.4, then this is also for you. So that is the Ferrum Audio Wandla HP edition, which is going to be one of the DACs that I'm going to sort of feature in this review. And the other is also another $3,000 HDAC, the very well-hyped, well-liked, and respected Laiv Harmony DAC. The Laiv Harmony has perhaps received more YouTube reviews than any other product in 2024. And it's not just because of the marketing efforts of the company, which I think is reasonable, but I think it's also because of how well received it has been for the price point of $2,700. So the Ferrum is around $3,300. The Laiv is $2,700, but the Ferrum has a headphone output. The Ferrum has an active preamp, and the Laiv does not have a preamp. The Laiv is what it is. It's a fantastic DAC, $2,700, $3,300. So they're both in around the $3,000 price point. So guys, I do want to start with a discussion on specs, because I mean, I'm the sort of reviewer, if you followed my work, I do get very engrossed with discussions on sound, and I often have been guilty of not diving into specs with the same level of zeal and rigor that I think I do try to dive into a discussion on sound with. So I have an iPad in front of me. I hope you won't mind me just sharing these specs with you. Of course, you can look it up yourself, but I do think it helps viewers if I just take you guys to the specs of both. So in this one video, you have a lot of information that you might need to decide if you want to buy one of these two or edition, what have you. Starting with the Laiv Harmony DAC. So of course, it has top quality components. It has an R2R architecture. And so these are individual resistors in a ladder network, which is the case for, R2R DACs, but they have a range with a tolerance of 0.05%. So that is impressive. And of course, the internal clock is handled by a Crystech CCHD 957 oscillator, which has the benefit of offering a very low phase noise of just minus 100 dBc per hertz. Then, of course, you have various modules, the power supply for the various modules delegated to the audio node Kaisei and Rubicon ZLH capacitor. So I'm not sure what these mean, guys. I'm not someone who's spent a lot of time understanding components of DACs. I'm better with discussing sound. Of course, I understand what a lot of DACs sound like, and I have a lot of experience with listening to DACs and understanding them and discussing their sound, so bear with me. So essentially it is flexible and easy to use, an OLED screen, fully customizable buttons. You can control two devices simultaneously with the remote. That is something I'll talk about in a separate review as well. And you have a plethora of options. So you have two single-ended analog outputs, two XLR outputs. You have an I2S, a coax, an optical for digital outputs, a USB. And what else? You have supported sampling rates. USB can go up to PCM 768 kilohertz, DSD 256. With the optical, you can go up to PCM 192 kilohertz. With the coaxial, you can go up to PCM 192 kilohertz. With the I2S, you can go up to the same as you can with the USB, which is a sampling rate of 768 kilohertz and DSD of 256. Yeah, so I've talked about the Crystech CCHD 957. The frequency response is 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. Total harmonic distortion is 0.0035%, which is impressive. Crosstalk of 110 dB, SNR, signal to noise ratio of 110 dB, and finally output impedance on RCA is 600 ohms, and of XLR it's 1200 ohms. Okay, and this has spikes. So this is the DAC. It's small but heavy, and it's very compact. I mean, small and compact and heavy. And these are the spikes. The spikes do have feet on which they rest. It's a universal voltage device, so that's another huge plus point in case you want to buy and sell, because all these things are sold internationally. It's heavy. Now, to talk about the specs of the Ferrum Wandla HP, and I'll read it off the headphones.com website. A shout out to headphones.com. They're not in any way associated with this review, but I do have a lot of respect for the work that these guys do, including the entire crew, Andrew, DMS, my friend Cameron Oatley. So yeah, they have a wonderful website, and I'm going to sort of read this out of the headphones.com site. This is the specs of the Wandla HP DAC and headphone amplifier. I'm just scrolling through. So yes, I mean, this has, like I said, a lot of power, 3.5 watts into 50 ohms. You don't need 20 watts to drive a headphone. 3.5 watts can get this Susvara to sing if it has the right sort of current delivery and has a good synergy with the Susvara, which to some extent has become the benchmark for difficult to drive headphones. This is going to get the Susvara to sing. I have tried the Susvara with it, and it sounds punchy, dynamic, very crystalline, and somewhat not aggressive in the sort of weird way, but aggressive in the sort of fun way. Dynamic range of 122 decibels. This, of course, like I talked about, has a 4.4 millimeter output for headphone usage, and you also get with this box, with the box that it comes with, a 4.4 to 6.3 mm adapter. This has, I mean, they've partnered with Signalist, renowned for their H2 player software to bring dynamic digital filtering. So this does have a lot of these digital filters, which I've talked about in a separate review, which are just very impressive in being able to, so in the listener is able to tell the differences between these filters with a lot more ease than is the case for most DAC filters. And this reminds me of a much higher end DAC, the Wise 501 and 502, which it trades blows with, by the way, for the meaningful sonic difference the filters inside make. Okay, so this has an ESS Sabre ES9038 Pro DAC chip, and it has XLR and unbalanced RCA outputs. And of course, ergonomic, it's great to look at. So a THD is 0.00016%, 100 minus 116 dB. Output power I've talked about, and dynamic range in 122 decibels. Resolution is 768 kilohertz at 32 bits, and DSD 512. It's got digital inputs, the USB-C, AES, optical, coax, ARC, I2S, and analog inputs include RCA. And the weight is a respectable 4.2 pounds, so which is approximately 1.9 kilograms. Quite light compared to the Laiv. Of course, you're not going to use it for weightlifting, so the weight perhaps matters less. I mean, looks might matter to you. This has the classic Ferrum bi-color look, and I like this a lot. The Laiv is a prettier DAC, undoubtedly. I mean, I have a lot of gold and black stuff going on. Even my power cords and my analog interconnects have a lot of gold and black colorway going on. So I do like the Laiv's colorway more and its finish. This is a more expensive DAC, but the Laiv I think looks more expensive if looks matter to you. But this looks fine. It doesn't look like a Chi-Fi product. It looks like a well-built unit, and it is. Okay, so you have a sense of what they look like. You have a sense of what they sound like. I do want to take, I mean, I've read out the output options for you, but you can take another close look. If you had to, you can pause this if you want to check if these output options will suffice for you. And I want to hold up the output and input options with the Laiv Harmony DAC in case you want to take another look at what sort of I/O you get. This is what you get. Great finish, great colorway, great looking. Okay. To get into discussion on sound, both these DACs, I think, sound. I'll talk about technical performance first. I would say equally resolving, and I would say that I think perhaps on most tracks with most filters, unless you have the Laiv on oversampling mode, I think the Ferrum seems like it has a little more resolution. And that's because the Laiv R2R presentation is ever so slightly warm and laid back. And the laid backness comes from the fact that the stage is projected a little further from you. Not very far from you, the way Holo Audio May does, which is one of the party tricks and wow factors of the Holo Audio May. This is a little further from you, which I think exudes a certain kind of laid backness. The opposite is the case with the Ferrum. The Ferrum is almost an opposite, a diametrically opposite sounding DAC. It's more forward, so things sound ever so slightly brighter, crisper. The background sounds jet black. So you get both the pros and cons of that. You get these images popping out of nowhere. Whereas I think the Laiv, where it stands out, is the way it layers the images, and you get a very classic R2R versus Delta Sigma distinction in how these two DACs vary in terms of their imaging performance. So the Laiv has this wonderful way in which you get these very, very distinct layers from which these images come at you or come to you. But with the Ferrum, you get a certain amount of blackness, and images just come out of nowhere and disappear into nowhere. And that effect is very impressive about the Ferrum. Because sometimes what that does is it gives you a sense of microdynamics and realism. Because you're getting these finger plucks just coming out of nowhere with the Ferrum. And it's just stunning. Whereas the Laiv, in terms of its beautiful holographic depth, and you're able to locate these sounds at a distance from you with varying levels of distances, that stuff is the stuff of Holo Audio May and is very impressive. Now, stage width is, I think, similar for both DCs. The Laiv Harmony on the NOS mode sounds quite wide, and I think with the OS mode it sounds ever so slightly less wide. But with the OS mode, and that's another feature of the Laiv we're talking about, the Laiv Harmony becomes almost a different DAC on the OS mode, and it becomes less laid back. It becomes more forward and more punchy and more dynamic. So you do get two flavors with the Laiv. But I mean, the Ferrum's blackness of background, this sort of clarity, and this insane way in which images just pop in and out is just something that I think I haven't heard in, honestly speaking, DACs at this price point. You'd have to go up to a Mola Mola Tambaki or I think a Core Dave to get that sort of imaging blackness. The blackness of background, rather, right? In terms of dynamics, impact, and punch and slam, I think they're both fairly punchy. They're both very punchy, both very well extended. I perceive the Laiv to have a slightly more rounded bass. You get a little more mid bass, I feel, and the bass notes linger a little longer. Whereas with the Ferrum, and perhaps because you don't get as much of that sort of mid bass feel, you get a better sense of sub bass extension and growl and kick, but you lose out a bit on the warmth. So they're both extremely well-performing DACs in terms of how they do bass, but their presentations vary, and in terms of dynamics, their presentations vary. And finally, timbre-wise, I would say the Laiv sounds, they both sound natural, by the way, but I think the Laiv sounds ever so slightly more natural to me, especially on the NOS mode, but then you are sacrificing a bit on incisiveness. It's all about a trade-offs, guys. I mean, neither of these DACs are imperfect. They're both different flavors of great. Okay, so in terms of tonality, and I've talked about the bass a bit, so you have a sense of what the bass sound frequencies replay sounds like. So the Ferrum is extended and somewhat more sub bass forward, and the Laiv is more rounded and has a better balance of sub bass and mid bass. Both punch hard. The Laiv is warmer. The mid-range, I think, is beautiful on both. The OS mode on Laiv does rival the Ferrum mid-range in terms of both sounding forward and very, very revealing and transparent. But if you want it more warmed and if you want more linger in vocal notes and the sort of trailing end of tones, the Laiv does give you that. I think the Ferrum has a mid-range that has snappier notes, so you get a sense of more mid-range resolution and more mid-range microdynamics. But I think with the Laiv, you get a slightly better sense of mid-range timbre. And finally, to talk about treble, I think these guys both do treble really, really well. I do want to say that if you're someone who is very bothered by treble, you do want to play around with the filters of the Ferrum Wandla HP, because in the plethora of filters that they offer, which I've talked about in a standalone review of the Ferrum, there's a certain filter, the ESS filter, which I personally like a lot, but I do think it might get slightly bright for some of you guys. But overall, it's not a bright sounding DAC. It doesn't have a bright sounding treble, but it's a very extended treble. And in that, I think it sounds different from the Ferrum Ur, which I thought had a treble roll off. So this I see as something that really would complement the Ur really well. The Laiv treble is also very extended, and you definitively get a sense of air around instruments and spaciousness, but it doesn't sound very forward. And I think at the same time, you do get sparkle when the track calls for it. So, I mean, for $3,000 each, these are some amazing treble performers, guys. Okay. Now, if I had to recommend a DAC for either of you, for one of you, for you guys, I think it would really come down to your system, right? Your system synergy. If your speakers and your amp, if your overall setup is something that you think needs a bit of warming up, if it's too forward or aggressive, and you want it to calm down a bit, you want to tame it a bit, then I think Laiv Harmony is the DAC to get. You can then tweak it with the OS mode and get a little more flavorfully forward presentation. If, however, you have the Ferrum setup for the headphone users, or you have a setup that you think needs a bit of waking up, needs a bit of caffeination, a setup that needs a little more energy and oomph and dynamics and punch, and an overall sense of energy and forwardness in the mids and treble, then I think the Ferrum is for you. However, both DACs surprised me to no end with their performance for the price. And for that, I would recommend both guys. But as I've talked about, they're not the same sounding DAC. They lie on different spectrum of tonalities. So do check it out if you can do Audition. That's always the best way to buy these things. So make this review one data point among many with which you make your purchase decision. And that's it for me, Sajid. I'm signing out. And if you like this video, give this a like. If you like my work, follow my channel and stay tuned for my next one. Bye-bye.